Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spaceflight Now's latest coverage of this operation here from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. Good to have you with us here on this Thursday, October 30th. We're broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. If this all feels like deja vu for those of you who were with us earlier tonight, it's a bit of a rinse and repeat as while it appeared briefly as though Blue Origin was potentially done for tonight with its attempt to static fire the New Glenn rocket, teams are in fact recycling. And so we're getting back into motion for what will hopefully be a static fire of the seven BE-4 engines at the base of this New Glenn rocket. We're looking live at Launch Complex 36 there at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station here in Florida. See that patrol helicopter going by once again, just at the top of the frame here. Want to give a big thanks to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, who's running the technical operations of the broadcast, and to our Adam Bernstein photographer, who's been a trooper throughout the course of preparing for this static fire test campaign and continues to marshal on as Blue is potentially on the cusp of actually doing a full static fire of its rocket here tonight. As we're just spinning up this live coverage, if you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream, since this is a little bit later than we typically would generate a new live stream. So the more you can help spread awareness that we are back on the air with dedicated coverage, that would be greatly appreciated. I also want to thank one of our other photographers, Michael Kane, who's helping out with moderator duties in the live chat. And as just reminded folks, and we'll continue to until we're done with our coverage here today, this is a static fire or a hot fire of this rocket. Blue Origin will not be attempting a launch today. Presumably, there's not the NASA payload actually on board the rocket right now. Anyway, once a good static fire test is completed, then the rocket would roll back into the hangar there at Launch Complex 36, and the payload would be integrated onto the vehicle at that point, roll it back out to the pad, bring it back up to this launch position, and then the launch campaign would really get underway. For those of you who were not with us the first time, but are joining us now for the first time tonight, as a reminder, we're looking very intently towards the top of the rocket. Just above the interstage, you can see some venting there. Once that venting stops, it'll be about 2 minutes out before the water deluge system activates. And while we did see it kick on before, it appears as though Blue Origin has enough in reserve that they were able to recycle and are preparing for another bite at the apple with this static fire tonight. And yes, in response to David's question there in the live chat, the flame stack, the flare stack that you see just to the right of the water tower in this camera's perspective for orientation, that is south of the pad, that is connected to the methane system. As far as the potential new T0 for this static fire test. We believe they are targeting 9:15 tonight. That is 9:15 Eastern, 01:15 UTC for our friends around the world. Again, this is a static fire test, and a test campaign means that things could shift around, and so that is not a hard and fast T0. And unlike a Falcon 9 or a Falcon Heavy rocket, New Glenn is more similar to, say, ULA's Vulcan rocket in the sense that once prop load has started, it does not commit them exclusively to a T0, that they do have time to hold in the count and adjust the T0 as needed up to obviously some uh, outset or previously set parameters. Given this is a static fire test, though, those aren't made publicly known widely. As we are awaiting what will hopefully be a static fire test of this New Glenn rocket, want to thank our moderators for quickly popping back into service. Alongside our Michael Kane is once again Rick Donner and Astro Joe. Also thanks to Cumulus Granatus, one of our channel members, for being back to help answer folks' questions in the chat tonight. So if in fact Blue is targeting a T0 of 9:15 tonight, that means we're in the final 5 minutes here and coming up on the terminal count, which, assuming they haven't greatly adjusted their timeline from the first launch attempt or from the first launch earlier this year, that terminal count begins in the final 4 minutes. We're keeping a close eye on the venting there just above the inner stage, that somewhat brown bronzish color in the middle of the rocket. Once that venting stops, it's about 2 minutes after that, in which the water deluge system should kick back on again. (9:12) now. In about a minute or so, we should see the venting taper off. Last time we saw it kick up a little bit and then conclude. So we're watching closely for that in the next about a minute or so, a little less than a minute. We are still seeing that upper stage venting at this point, which may suggest that 915 isn't quite the exact T0 here, but we're continuing to monitor the progress of this campaign. Of course, we are past the 915 mark now, still watching the venting continue on the GS2 Glen Stage 2. So as long as that venting is continuing on, it would suggest that they are somewhere above 2 minutes out from conducting a static fire if they're able to do so tonight. For those of you who are just joining us, we are continuing to watch Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket as we believe they were in a recycle to attempt to conduct another static fire. We're still standing by as don't know if they're still making an attempt at it yet, and we're just still a little bit ahead of when the T0 is now currently planned. But a good indication that we're right up to the a couple minutes ahead of the static fire beginning is when the venting on the upper stage ceases. So we're keeping a very close eye on that part of the rocket for now. Coming up to the bottom of the hour here on the East Coast, just about 9:30 Eastern, nearly 0130 UTC for our friends around the world. We're continuing to stand by as Blue Origin marshals on towards what appears will be a second attempt at the static fire of its New Glenn rocket there at Launch Complex 36. Again, as this is a static fire, not a launch, and a test campaign at that, specifics are sparse, to say the least. We will continue to provide as good of updates as we can throughout the course of this live static fire coverage. In the meantime, as we're awaiting a little bit further refinement on when the T0 may actually take place, want to go ahead and show you the mission animation for the launch when Blue Origin integrates the NASA payload atop the rocket. This is an animation of what launch day will look like, or a decent approximation to it. At this point in time, Blue Origin has not published a launch timeline for the EscaPADE mission, so we don't have uh, a good sense of exactly when all these milestones will happen after liftoff, as far as stage separation, the jettison of the payload fairings encapsulating the EscaPADE satellites, and when exactly they will be jettisoned. But this gives you a good visual approximation of what the process will look like. This animation created by Blue Origin in partnership with Rocket Lab, who designed the EscaPADE, or built the EscaPADE satellites. Here's an animation now of what those satellites will look like once they arrive at Mars. They are twin satellites, identical in basically every way, nicknamed Blue and Gold after the colors of University of California, Berkeley. The goal of the EscaPADE mission is to study the Martian atmosphere and learn more about how the red planet became inhospitable and the impact that the solar wind may have had on this process. The EscaPADE spacecraft are equipped with three main science instruments that will be used during the roughly 11-month science expedition at Mars. Of course, that's just what it's baselined at. There's certainly the potential for this mission to be extended if the spacecraft are still in good working order and NASA chooses to extend the mission with continuing budgeting from Congress. Spacecraft are equipped with the magnetometers, an electrostatic analyzer, and a Langmuir probe. This EscaPADE satellite mission is part of NASA's what they call simplex, or small innovative missions for planetary exploration. Missions under the Simplex program are given a mission cap of $55 million and are a way of getting additional NASA missions out to various parts of the solar system at a cheaper cost than some other planetary exploration missions like Maven, for example, which had a mission cost of $671 million. Also realize I've used the acronym EscaPADE a number of times in this and the previous broadcast without explicitly mentioning what that stands for. EscaPADE is an acronym for Escape and Plasma Acceleration and Dynamics Explorers, billed as the first multi-spacecraft orbital science mission to the Red Planet. We actually had an opportunity to see the twin EscaPADE spacecraft as they were finishing integration and checkouts at the Rocket Lab facilities in Long Beach, California. We have a video up on the YouTube channel right now to take a look at part of that trip and give you a sense of the size and scope of these spacecraft. So you can head on over and watch that video anytime. Again, that's up on the YouTube channel under the video section. Time now just about 9:36 p.m. Eastern, 1:36 UTC as we continue to monitor the New Glenn rocket for an attempt number two at a static fire test tonight. I want to go back to an animation of one of the important parts of the New Glenn architecture, which is the recovery of their first stage boosters in a similar fashion to how the Falcon 9 boosters are recovered either by the drone ship in the Pacific or Atlantic Ocean or back at a landing pad at Vandenberg or Cape Canaveral. In a similar vein, at least for now, Blue Origin is going to be using its recovery vessel Jacqueline for all of its booster recoveries. TBD if there are future plans for Blue Origin to build a landing zone out near Launch Complex 36. But as you see in this animation, following stage separation, the booster will use three out of the seven, and then paring that down to, I believe, just the center BE4 engine to complete the landing burn, touching down. You see that pivot from three to one, and then the landing legs deploy for what will hopefully be a good touchdown on the recovery vessel, as you see in this animation, named Jacqueline after Blue Origin founder Jeff Bezos' mother. It was, in fact, the inability to safely recover the booster as intended during the first mission, which caused a mishap investigation to be triggered, and that was eventually cleared in the late spring timeframe. Quoting from the Federal Aviation Administration, quote, a final mishap report identified the proximate cause of the mishap as an inability of New Glen's first stage to restart the engines, preventing a reentry burn from occurring and resulting in the loss of the stage. The agency then went on to state that Blue did identify seven corrective actions that it addressed in order to proceed towards this launch attempt that we're going to be seeing here in the weeks to come for NG2 or New Glenn 2, carrying NASA's EscaPADE mission, sending it on its way to the Red Planet. Just about quarter till 10 here on the East Coast as we're continuing to monitor things with Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket. Let's wind the clock back a bit, show the progress from when this booster called Never Tell Me the Odds made its appearance from the rocket factory adjacent to the NASA Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. The booster rolled out in the morning hours of October 8th to begin to make its long journey out towards Launch Complex 36 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. It's a nice overview video showing you from the top to the tail of this booster. I'll be supporting NASA's EscaPADE mission. See the name there. Never tell me the odds, just above the engine section where the landing legs are located. Not too bad of traffic as Blue Origin began to take this vehicle out to make the jaunt to the Cape. Fast forward a couple of days when the booster was safely inside the hangar adjacent to the pad there at LC-36, and teams were in the process of integrating the booster with the upper stage and then hoisting it over the flight test article. Once it had the payload fairings attached to the top, then the vehicle was rolled out to the pad and then brought up to the launch position for the start of checkouts in preparation for the static fire test campaign that we've seen unfold throughout the course of the past several hours now today. Just about 10 minutes till the top of the hour. We're watching closely for that upper stage venting to stop. That would be an indication that Blue is within a few minutes of a static fire. Just about 5 minutes before the top of the hour, we are starting to see the venting from GS2, Glen Stage 2, pick up quite a bit. It's a good visual indication that we may actually be getting close to a static fire test this time, as we did see things really accelerate there from the upper stage before they quieted down and the venting stopped prior to the water deluge system being activated. So once this vent concludes, got about 2 minutes before the deluge system kicks on or thereabouts. Looks like the vent may have stopped now, so should be about 2 minutes away from the deluge system activating and the static fire test beginning. Standing by for attempt number 2. Saw that little cascade of ice there from the booster. It appears to indicate that the tanks were pressurizing ahead of the ignition of the 7 BE4 engines at the base of the New Glenn rocket. Standing by for activation of the deluge system and the static fire test to begin. Or potentially less than half a minute away from the deluge system activating. Comes about 10 seconds before ignition. There goes the deluge system by the look of it. And it appears we have the start of a good static fire test. May be able to hear a bit of a rumble from the 7 BE4 engines. Standing by for that. And it appears there's been the shutdown of the engines, which will conclude the static fire test. Of course, now that this test appears to have concluded, uh, from the outside looking in, uh, potentially a nominal static fire test. Of course, we'll wait to hear confirmation from Blue Origin. Believe it wasn't too terribly long after they accomplished the static fire the first go around when we saw an update from CEO Dave Limp. So we'll be watching for word from either Dave Limp from Jeff Bezos or Blue Origin from their company accounts for confirmation that they completed a good static fire test. And then we'll get into the mode for the launch campaign. Of course, that will start with the rocket rolling back into the hangar at LC-36. They will integrate the payload with the two EscaPADE spacecraft and the Viasat rideshare. And the rocket will be brought back out to the pad, brought back up into this configuration that you see here, and we'll be ready to see the next launch of a New Glenn rocket. I want to give a big thanks to our moderators in the chat who quickly came back and helped to hold things down in the chat, to Astro Joe and Rick Donner for being back with us once again, as well as one of our channel members, Cumulus Granatus, for helping to answer folks' questions in the chat. Big thanks to our Adam Bernstein as well for sticking it out, making sure that we were able to bring you these live pictures of the static fire of the second New Glenn rocket. I want to thank our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, as well, for running the technical operations of this broadcast. Quick reminder, we do have a launch to cover tomorrow with the flight of the Starlink 11-23 mission from Vandenberg Space Force Base. So we look forward to welcoming you back here with that coverage. Windows set to open at about 12:44 p.m. Pacific, 3:44 p.m. Eastern, 1944 UTC. Our thanks to Mel Roberts Harold for a $10 super chat saying, glad we could all hang out this evening. And we are to we leave you tonight with a replay, one last look at the static fire of the New Glenn rocket. And for all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks. And until then, enjoy this replay, and bye-bye.